There's a man somewhere right now sitting in a room he didn't clean, avoiding a conversation he knows he should have, scrolling through his phone while something inside him quietly whispers that he should be doing more. Not more in the ambitious, career-driven sense, more in the basic, human sense, holding himself together, making a decision without asking someone else first, facing discomfort without running from it. And the strange part is, he knows. He knows something is missing. He can feel the gap between who he is and who he was supposed to become. But he doesn't know how to close it, because nobody ever showed him how. And that's the part most people miss. When the world sees a man who avoids responsibility, who crumbles under pressure, who can't hold a relationship steady, or look someone in the eye during a hard conversation, it assumes he chose this, that he's lazy, that he doesn't care, that he simply refused to grow up. But here's what almost no one understands. You can't become what you are never shown. A man-child is not a man who refused to grow. He's a man who was never given the tools to. And that distinction changes everything, because somewhere in his childhood, something essential was missing. Not food, not shelter, not even affection necessarily. What was missing was a model, a living, breathing example of what it looks like to be a man who faces things instead of avoiding them. A man who speaks when silence is easier. A man who stays when leaving is more comfortable. A man who holds his emotions without being swallowed by them. Psychologists refer to this as a failure of emotional scaffolding. It happens when a boy grows up without consistent modeling of emotional regulation, decision-making, and self-accountability. The father may have been absent, physically or emotionally. The mother may have been overbearing, doing everything for him because it felt easier, or because she didn't trust him to manage on his own. And in that environment, something quietly breaks, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. The boy learns that someone will always step in. That discomfort is something to escape, not endure. That vulnerability is dangerous, and strength means staying silent. He doesn't learn how to sit with difficulty. He learns how to avoid it. He doesn't learn how to process emotions. He learns how to suppress them or hand them to someone else to carry. And over time, this becomes his operating system. Not because he's weak, because it's the only system he was ever given. There's a concept in developmental psychology called learned helplessness. It's what happens when a person is repeatedly placed in situations where their own actions don't seem to matter. Eventually, they stop trying. Not because they can't, because their brain has been trained to believe that effort leads nowhere. For many man-children, this pattern started early. Maybe he was criticized every time he tried something new. Maybe his mistakes were met with anger instead of guidance. Maybe every time he reached for independence, someone pulled it back, corrected him, took over. So he stopped reaching. And that stopping didn't look like rebellion. It looked like compliance. It looked like a quiet, agreeable boy who never caused trouble. But inside, something was slowly shutting down. The part of him that was supposed to learn how to navigate life on his own terms was being replaced by dependency, by passivity, by a deep, unspoken belief that he wasn't capable of handling things himself. And nobody noticed, because quiet boys don't raise alarms. There's also another layer most people overlook. In many families, the boy wasn't just untaught, he was actively mistaught. He was told that being a man means never crying, that asking for help is weakness, that emotions are problems to be buried, not conversations to be had. So he learned to perform a version of masculinity that was hollow, hard on the outside, empty on the inside. He could mimic strength, but he couldn't feel it. He could act unbothered, but underneath he was drowning in confusion he couldn't name. Psychologists call this alexithymia, the inability to identify and describe one's own emotions. It doesn't mean he doesn't feel. It means he was never given the language. And without language, emotions become pressure. Pressure with no release valve, so it leaks out sideways. As irritability, as withdrawal, as numbness. As a man who seems present but is quietly absent from his own life. And here's where it shows up in adulthood. He avoids hard conversations because he never learned that conflict can be healthy. He defers decisions because making the wrong one once felt catastrophic. He stays in jobs he hates, relationships that drain him, routines that numb him. Not because he's comfortable, but because discomfort feels like drowning, and he was never taught how to swim. He may rely on a partner to manage his emotional world, his schedule, his social life, not out of entitlement, but out of a quiet, almost invisible helplessness that even he doesn't fully understand. He feels frustrated with himself. He knows he should be handling things differently. But the gap between knowing and doing feels impossible to cross when no one ever built the bridge for you. People around him grow impatient. They say things like, "Just step up," or "act like a man." And every time he hears those words, something tightens inside him. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he doesn't know what that looks like. He has no blueprint, no internal reference point, no memory of someone showing him how a man moves through fear, through failure, through the quiet weight of being responsible for his own life. But here's the part that rarely gets spoken about. Beneath the avoidance, beneath the passivity, beneath the surface that others judge so quickly, there is grief. A grief that doesn't have a name. It's the grief of never having been fathered. Not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional, psychological sense. It's the grief of watching other men seem to know something you were never told. Of feeling like everyone else received instructions that you somehow missed. It's standing in a room full of capable adults and feeling like a boy wearing an oversized coat, hoping nobody notices. He doesn't talk about this. He might not even realize it's grief. He might call it laziness, or confusion, or just the way he is. But it's not just the way he is, it's the way he was shaped. And there is something else hiding underneath. A quiet shame that never sleeps. The shame of being a grown man who still feels like a child inside. The shame of needing help with things others seem to handle effortlessly. The shame of knowing that the world expects him to lead, to provide, to protect, and feeling like he can barely hold himself together. He compares himself constantly to his friends who seem to have figured it out, to his father, even if his father was the one who failed him, to a version of himself that exists only in his imagination, the man he believes he should have been by now. And that comparison becomes a quiet torture, not loud enough to be a crisis, just constant enough to erode everything slowly. The man-child carries a wound that is invisible precisely because society doesn't recognize it as one. A boy who wasn't taught to fight isn't called wounded. He's called soft. A boy who wasn't taught to lead isn't called neglected. He's called weak. And so the wound stays hidden, dressed up as a personality flaw. mistaken for a choice. But it was never a choice. It was an absence of guidance that left a hole in the shape of the man he was supposed to become. But here's what changes everything. The fact that he wasn't taught doesn't mean he can't learn. Emotional maturity is not something you either receive in childhood or miss forever. It's something that can be built slowly, deliberately, at any age. Not through shame, not through someone yelling, "Grow up," but through awareness. Through the quiet, honest recognition that the patterns he lives by are not personality, they're programming. And programming can be rewritten. Psychologists call this reparenting. It's the process of becoming for yourself what was never provided by others. Learning to sit with discomfort instead of running. Learning to make a decision and accept the consequences instead of freezing. Learning that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is the very foundation of it. And this process doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small, almost invisible moments. The first time he holds a boundary without apologizing. The first time he faces a hard conversation and stays in the room. The first time he makes a mistake and doesn't collapse under the weight of it. Those moments don't look dramatic from the outside, but inside they are seismic. Because each one is a man teaching himself something no one ever taught him. Each one is a quiet act of becoming. And maybe that's the deepest truth about the man-child who was never taught how to be a man. He's not a failure, he's unfinished. Not because he refused to grow, but because growth requires soil that was never prepared for him. And now, for the first time, he's planting his own ground. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. And there is something profoundly brave about a man who builds himself from a blueprint he was never given, who becomes not the man he was raised to be, but the man he chooses to be, one quiet, uncomfortable, deeply human step at a time. Because manhood was never about having all the answers. It was about being willing to face the questions. And he's facing them now. Not because someone finally taught him, but because he finally decided to learn.